Our third panel discussion of the day is one. I think this is one that's very important to all of us, and it is most certainly something many of us take for granted, but it's critical to the growth and the development that we've seen here throughout the Eastern Shore and the peninsula. Our third panel is the Southern Delmarva Water and Sewer. It's time to get off the pot. So I'd like to introduce everybody that we have up here as folks are making their way in. I'd just ask you to please be respectful of our presenters, curb those side conversations in the hallway if we can. Our first presenter is going to be Amanda Pollock. She is the Water Resources Engineer for the Center for Watershed Protection. Let's give her a round of applause. We've also got Mr. Stuart Hall. He's the Deputy County Administrator of Public Works and Facilities down in Accomack County. Thank you for coming, Stuart. And then we have John Ashman, who is the Director of Utility Planning in Sussex County, Delaware. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to them. One of these clickers works better than the other. I'm going to let you guys figure it out.
Oh, there we go. All right, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. So I'm Amanda Pollock. I'm a water resources engineer with the Center for Watershed Protection, but I've spent my entire engineering career here in Salisbury. I worked for George Miles and Bureau for 16 years, and then I was with the city of Salisbury for about the last 10 years. So I'm going to give you a little bit on the Maryland perspective of water and sewer and why it is time to get off the pot now. So let me see. Where do I aim it? Aim there. Oh, there we go. All right. So really briefly today, I'm going to touch on federal funding and the opportunity for funding with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and then we'll talk a little bit about Wicomico County.
I think this is your winner.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Okay, so right now there's a huge opportunity for improvements in water and sewer due to what the federal government did last November. So with the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act, about $50.4 billion for water and sewer was put into the nation's economy. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically about what that means for Maryland, but this is unprecedented funding for water and sewer infrastructure. And essentially, the federal government has put the money out to the states, and Maryland is going to implement this through their state revolving fund, or their SRF. So there's a drinking water SRF and a clean water SRF, and clean water deals with wastewater and stormwater. So projects are applied for and then prioritized in order and funded in priority order. The states determine what the criteria is to fund a project. And then there's low interest loans. There's also loan forgiveness and subsidies for disadvantaged communities. So again, this is a lot of money that has just hit the economy for this type of project. So in Maryland, the SRF is administered through the Maryland Department of the Environment. The typical term for an SRF loan is 30 years or the length of a project. They wouldn't want the loan term to exceed a project length. And they have very good interest rates and even lower interest rates if you qualify as a disadvantaged community, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But first, I wanted to show you what Maryland's share was. So in federal fiscal year 22, Maryland is getting $144 million for water and sewer projects. And you can see how it's broken out. There's a significant amount of money going to lead services and making sure that lead services are being replaced. And what's interesting to me about the lead service lines is it's not just the public portion. Usually this type of money is going to municipalities and counties for the public portion of projects, but this could actually replace lead service lines on private property. And that's really important for homeowners, because if you have a very old home that has a lead line, there was very few options to be able to afford to replace that before without hiring a plumber and paying for it yourself. You'll also see money for emerging contaminants, and that's a big topic. If you've heard of PFAS or forever chemicals, the federal government has put a lot of investment into trying to solve some of those issues. And then there is a subsidy for disadvantaged communities that's required through the federal infrastructure law. And it specifies how much can be, or it has to be a subsidy up to that amount for disadvantaged communities and with loan forgiveness. So even though the SRF is typically a loan program, you can get principal forgiveness. So for the Maryland Eastern Shore area, I wanted to show you what it takes to be qualified as a disadvantaged community. And this is the requirements right now that the state has, but interestingly, Maryland has just put out, and right now we're in the public comment period, to change these definitions. So if you were applying for the SRF program this past year, this is what would have taken to be qualified as a disadvantaged community. And you can see the towns and counties here on the lower shore that qualify. But right now, if you go to the Maryland Department of the Environment's website, they're looking to change the criteria a little bit for this next funding round that opens in January. And like, for example, instead of being 70% of the median household income to the state, they're looking to raise that to 80%. And instead of just meeting one piece of criteria, they're looking to have you meet multiple criteria to be qualified as a disadvantaged community. But again, it's really important and it's critical if you are eligible to apply that way, because you will get additional subsidies and loan forgiveness. So just very briefly, what does the SRF cover? So you can fund wastewater treatment plants, drinking water, water towers, stormwater, sewer collection systems, and pump stations, water distribution systems. So pretty much anything water, sewer, and stormwater related that has to do with planning, design, construction, equipment, land acquisition. This does not fund things like routine monitoring, operation and maintenance, or fines and penalties, but it funds a lot. So the program in Maryland, applications are typically due on January 31st. So again, you'll start to see this first huge slug of money going into the public, the local economy after the end of January. So I wanted to touch on briefly some of the needs of the Eastern Shore. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar that Wicomico County recently adopted a water and sewer master plan, and they hired the engineering firm of George Miles and Bureau to do that plan. And it was accepted by the county council in 2021. So Wicomico County is one of the only counties in the state of Maryland that doesn't have any sewer facilities. So this is a really important plan for the county to implement. There's approximately 18,000 septic systems in Wicomico County, and the wastewater facilities are primarily contained to municipalities. So the county's comprehensive water and sewer plan has always shown a map of priority areas where there are potentially failing septic systems. So those were some of the key targeted areas. And it's important to look at the septic systems here in the county, because our drinking waters are typically from shallow wells, which are unconfined aquifers. So it's part of the groundwater table. So you don't want your septic system to fail, because it's intimately tied to your drinking water. So the master plan identified two different ways to serve all the septic systems and to meet the needs of the county. So of the 18,000 septic systems, the plan recommended that approximately 10,000 of those that are close to an existing municipality with a sewer system be served by that municipality somehow. And then approximately 5,000 would be served on new rural systems. So there would be new wastewater treatment plants created throughout the county for rural systems. And then there would be approximately 3,000 septic systems that would remain as septic systems, because they're ultimately too remote to tie into one of the other places. So I'll briefly touch on next steps. I could go on for this slide for about an hour, so I'll be really, really short on this one, but there are a lot of next steps. This is not an easy process. There's a lot for Wicomico County to do, and again, this could model on any of the counties on the shore. There's the planning aspects and legislative aspects as far as amending the county's water and sewer plan, coming up with the priority funding area designations, which is important. If you want to obtain that SRF funding, you have to be in a priority funding area, and defining precisely what are those sanitary district boundaries. You also have to document specifically what is the problem you're trying to solve. So the health department will do septic surveys and identify failing septic systems. And there will be a preliminary engineering report, or a PER, that's required by a lot of the funding agencies to really dive in and determine the costs of the different systems. Right now, everything's been done at a very high level, and they'll continue to scale down and start looking at things at a much smaller level. Then there's a very large component to have public outreach and education, because you're not going to be successful in this type of a project unless the public understands why they need to do it, and really be able to provide their input and give learn about the projects and why it's needed. Financially, they will be determining rate structures, and that's whether or not you're tying into a municipality or a standalone system, and applying for funding. So like I mentioned before, there's the SRF money. There's money through USDA for rural communities, as well as community development block grants or CDBG. So there's many, many funding opportunities, and again, an unprecedented amount of funding for this type of project. And then finally, to establish a sanitary district, if that is the route that Wicomico County decides to go, that actually needs to happen through the state legislature. So there are many different paths that need to happen at about the same time to start accomplishing this. So I thank you, and I think we'll take questions at the end.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Thank
So great on time too. So Stuart Hall from Accomack County, the Deputy County Administrator of Public Works and Facilities.
Great. Can everyone hear me okay back there? All right, it's working. Well, good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share what we have going on in Accomack. If you're familiar with the area, you're probably thinking there hasn't been a whole lot going on there in recent years, but we've got things happening now. That's the good news. And if you've traveled recently in Accomack County, maybe on a family vacation or what have you, you may have noticed the railroad tracks are gone. That's a big thing. That's part of a large project that the Accomack Northampton Transportation District Commission is working on, with the idea, as it builds out over a number of years, it would be similar to the rails to trails that Chrisfield has to our north. And from my bailiwick, the great thing about it is the right-of-way is going to be maintained for utilities. Water, sewer, broadband, maybe natural gas in the future, who knows. So if you've been driving through there, you probably saw the railroad tracks gone. You may have noticed this 8-inch black pipe, miles and miles of it laying along there. And that's not a tunnel for Amazon packages to Cape Charles. That is sewer pipe. In early 2019, pre-pandemic, before we even knew what the word coronavirus meant, local leaders, the elected representatives, started meeting about what can we do to leverage the town of Anancock's wastewater treatment plant. They had a plant that was about 3 times larger than what they needed. We had a need for sewer in other communities and for projects. So the county and a committee had met with Hampton Road Sanitation District maybe 15 years prior. And at the time, they were not interested in serving the Eastern Shore. And if you're not familiar with HRSD, they're the big gorilla in Tidewater, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, so forth, Suffolk. And I think we all know that sewer is a volume business. So we were hoping to leverage the resources that they could bring to bear, both people and equipment and expertise, frankly. I brought these slides. I should probably use a few of them. So there are things happening in Accomack right now, and actually Northampton, because the line is coming from Nassawadox north all the way to town of Accomack. So a little background, if you're not that familiar with Accomack, rural county, approximately 33,000 residents, which has been pretty stable for 120 years probably. We have Nassawadox Flight Facility. Saw Dave earlier. It's wonderful for the community and the region. Seafood, agriculture, poultry, the big industries, and government and schools as well employ a lot of people. So the challenges for Accomack: minimal infrastructure, existing infrastructure. The towns have some services. In some areas it's limited. Accomack County has a force main that runs from the airport and industrial park north to the town of Anancock's treatment plant. But we don't have any residential connections. The fast food restaurants, hotels, and so forth along that path are connected to the line. Let's see, pretty much it for that slide. Density's been the issue. You've got houses scattered all along, very small businesses for the most part. So it's been hard to support public services and have a rate structure that is affordable for the business owners. There were attempts at regional solutions. Probably early 2000s, there was a PSA formed, which was short-lived. It's between Accomack and Northampton County, and probably 10 years after that, another swing was taken at it conceptually, but never got off the ground. and some concerns, of course, that came up with that. One was taxing authority of the PSA. In Virginia, they actually have that. And the other is the dreaded two words, mandatory connections, which Accomack has never considered, but, that always comes up in conversations. And also, COVID really changed things. A lot of money started flowing into Accomack, but prior to that, it wasn't always available. And the county did not have a huge staff of grant writers to go after these types of things and put a project together. So back to HRSD. So they're doing this very large project starting at town of Nassawadox, where the hospital was formerly located, and taking over the water and sewer assets there, moving north, town of Exmoor, and then all the way up to Anancock. It's a $21 million project. The town of Accomack Spur was just approved earlier this year, and that will take it from the only area right to the town of Accomack. The residential areas are not planned to be connected, at least from the get-go, but we have a high concentration of public buildings there. We have a jail, county administration building, circuit courthouse, district courthouse, attorney's offices, and so forth. And back to the volume business, the rates before this project, or actually there are current rates right now, are very high because we just don't have the customer base. So the hope is with joining the Hampton Road Sanitation District, their rates are looked at across the entire district. So, well, let's be honest, the Tidewater areas are going to be carrying the Eastern Shore a little bit, right? Until we get more density and get some things going there, at least initially with the large capital outlay on the equipment and the pipe. And HRSD has officially assumed maintenance and ownership of the town of Anancock treatment plant. We're still working on an operating agreement with the county. It's not really slowing anything up at the moment, but we're hoping in early 23 to get a operating agreement with the idea that the county's sewer assets will transfer to HRSD. All right, and there's also been some allocations to town of Wachapreague, town of Parksley. If you know anything about Wachapreague, you know that VIMS, Virginia Institute of Marine Science, which is a part of the College of William and Mary, they own a lot of the structures in town. They've invested millions and millions of dollars on a seawater lab, oyster research, and so forth. And they're a big partner in that. But the idea is that would be another spur to the line, which would come from town of Wachapreague, run west, and tie in with the main at the railroad crossing by Route 13. And town of Parksley, the business district is served by a mass drain field right now. They have water service to the entire town, but just sewer to the business district. So the idea is the next phase after the town of Accomack would be keep following the railroad right away and pick up as many customers as possible until we start approaching the capacity of the Anancock plant, which is 750,000 gallons per day. So I threw a picture in there. That's the pipe. It's exciting, isn't it? Yeah. I'm an engineer in a room full of economic development people. You want to see the businesses and houses next to the pipe, right? And that's pretty much it. I guess we're answering questions at the end, and I put up my phone number and email address if you're interested in follow-up questions. And just one final note, someone asked me right before I walked in, who is the economic development director for Accomack County. We don't have a full-time person right now. You may have known Rich Morrison, who recently moved back to Michigan, but we have been interviewing, and we have some other resources brought to bear to help out in the meantime. So we're going to try to get things back rolling.
Thank you so much, Stuart. We have heard from Maryland. We have heard from Virginia. That leaves one more, right? So we're going to hear from Mr. John Ashman. He's the Director of Utility Planning in Sussex County, Delaware, who is experiencing a lot of growth. So I'm sure he's got a lot to share with us.
I'll back up here quick. Get it figured out. Okay. So the main task, I think, when we were assigned was let's see what we can do about what some of our issues are. So we'll get to some of the issues, but I wanted to give you a brief history of Sussex County or a background on us. We currently have 80,000 existing wastewater customers and growing every day. And we're at 3,200 water customers right now, and that's also expanding. We have a new district probably coming online in the next 6 to 9 months, probably. We have 4 county-owned and operated wastewater treatment facilities. 3 are land application, 1 is ocean outfall. But there's also the municipalities that also have their own systems, water and sewer. We do partner with some of them, and there are private wastewater providers and water providers in Sussex County as well. We also partner with them as they provide us bulk water. We sell it to the individual customers. And a lot of people ask why we get into so many projects, and you'll see that on the next slide. And it's basically with Delaware Code, anybody that applies or sends us petitions, we have to at least act upon them. We have to either prove that it's a viable project or a not viable project. So this is basically our current septic remediation project. And these are all existing communities within Sussex County. They're on-site septic systems or privately owned and operated systems, which is basically a giant septic system. And this list keeps growing. There's 2 down there at the bottom you'll see that are to be determined. One of those actually goes to council for adoption this week, and the other one will probably go right after the first of the year. These are all funded mostly from the SRF and USDA projects, and we'll get into a little more background on what Amanda was talking about as well. So the county works a little different where we have a lot of private developers doing communities. And basically this is just a quick typical process here. And these projects have to go through plus and TAC, and then they hit the county level. First, they have to get their land use approval from planning and zoning and approval from county council. This can take anywhere from 6 months to 18 months, depending on opposition or whether they have their information together. And then the developer submits for what we call a sewer service concept evaluation. Basically, we take that, we look at where the best connection can be for them into our existing system, how they're going to get there, and whether there's any upgrades needed. And if they're not in what's our tier 1 service area, they have to somehow get there, either by being annexed or make themselves contiguous to our district. That can be that they have to help provide sewer service to other parcels on the way to get to theirs. We then do what we call an infrastructure use agreement. This is fairly new, probably about 2018. And basically this takes the project's proposed EDUs or equivalent dwelling units, and we peak that out and we use that number towards what the existing infrastructure cost or what we know future upgrades are going to be required. And then they do what is called a catch-up contribution to help pay for anything that's going to happen to the system or to catch up and help pay that loan off that's on the existing system quicker, helping all the existing customers who are already paying for that. Concurrently, they can submit their construction plans for review and approval, and then they go into a construction agreement and they get bonded and have a notice to proceed. So that's just a quick developer project. It takes a while, but that's how most of the things are working. So what I concentrated a little bit on was some of the issues that are impacting our ability to fund and complete some of these septic elimination projects and water projects. So one big hurdle right now is land value. The last 2 to 3 years in Sussex County, the land value has went extremely high. So trying to buy private easements, pump stations, anything where you need to expand a facility, it gets kind of expensive. That cost gets added into the project. In order to make the project affordable, we have to submit all that information to SRF and USDA, and they max them out at a 1.5% of median household income. So that hits our top. Another issue right now is material costs and availability. We have extremely long lead times on pump station components, piping, certain sizes of materials. We're being told they just can't get it. They don't know when they'll get it. So we're swapping out materials the whole way through projects. Another issue that we see is the National Environmental Policy Act, which is NEPA. And they have us sort of assessing impacts to what we consider already disturbed areas. We're going into existing communities that have been built for 30, 40 years. And we have to go in there and look for historical and cultural affairs, which sometimes will trigger a phase 1 or phase 2 because they were never in there originally. So now when they find something that slows the project down, again, adding to the cost and the disgruntled residents. Then we have a big hurdle right now, which is our restrictions on utility installation. And a lot of times we would install our pipelines in existing road right-of-ways. They're getting full in Delaware. You add natural gas, cable, everything that's in there, fiber. We're kind of being pushed to the private property, which causes us to go into land acquisition mode, which if anybody has done this, when you start trying to reach customers along a roadway, some properties are owned by multiple people. Some properties you can't even find the owner. So this takes a lot of work, a lot of extra time on a project. And all this extended process and locating the owners, it just keeps adding and adding and adding to the prices of our projects. Projects that we were estimating at, 2 to 3 million last year are now, $6 million. The people aren't making that much more money, so basically we're asking for more loan and grants. Well, not really loan, they call it principal forgiveness now, but it's sort of the same thing. It's just not as big as it used to be. So again, on the easement acquisition, we have residents who will refuse crucial easements. This causes redesign of projects. 2 of the projects that we're on now, they've actually changed to complete different collection method. We prefer gravity connection. It's just easier. We have it all figured out. But now we're going to vacuum systems and grinder pump systems, which are just a little more costly to own and operate, but it gets them off of their on-site septic systems that are polluting the water. Some of the funding application hurdles are, they're requiring some extensive design work before you actually even get a commitment of the loan. So you're basically spending money that there's a possibility you'll never get back, because if that project is not fundable, you basically sit on all that money. This goes anywhere from defining pump station locations to actually securing those pump station locations. And another one with the SRF is the Davis-Bacon wage rates. So these wage rates from the state and federal government, we've seen on our projects, they're increasing between 20 and 25%. And the county doesn't have the money. You saw that list. We can't fund all those projects on our own. It would be nice, but we do have to go to state and federal government for that. So, all of these items actually add to the time, add to the cost of our projects. Am I out of time yet? Can I do one quick?
No.
Okay. So this was just an example. So we have a Piney Neck Regional Wastewater Facility, which is a land application facility. It's not very big. It's actually a small system. It's hard to keep it managed just because of the size of it and the customers coming to it. So the customers are increasing, but we don't have a lot of extra land there that we can utilize. So we're looking at redirecting this. We're calling it our diversion to our South Coastal Regional Wastewater Facility. And this is our ocean outfall facility. So just to stay out of the road right-of-ways, we have to go with 46 easements. So that's 46 landowners you have to find. You have to get them to talk to you. You have to develop agreements. You have to develop plats. You have to agree to pricing if there is any pricing. This actually follows a power transmission line, but they will not let you share in their easement that they have. So we have to stay just to the outside of that. But this is basically our quickest thing. And the first 20 to 25 were probably quick to obtain. There's another 10 to 15 that are out there that are hanging. That's somebody wants a little more money or will not come to a final agreement. And there's also the ones that are owned by, 5 or 6 family members. And 3 family members agree and 2 disagree and 1 wants more money. So You sit and you battle back and forth with those for a while. And then we do have several that are going to go to condemnation. We are going to actually, we have enough in line that we can condemn those parcels. It's basically just condemning the easement. We don't want to own the property. We just want to go through there. So those will go into condemnation, which costs us more money and time. And all this previously would have just been placed in a road right away or existing right away, but we can no longer. I can't say we can no longer do that. It's harder to be able to do that, just to find space in those road right of ways.
All right. So we have an opportunity. Apparently, the only person more efficient than scientists and rocket men are utility planners and wastewater management engineers. So we've got an opportunity. We'd love to take are there any questions from the audience while we have this panel of experts up here? Again, this is something that we all utilize. Yes, sir.
John, this is directed towards you. An example of an INET easement,
Yeah.
is that something you'll also offer a general improvement services, or is that strictly for the county?
We usually stick strictly to the county use, just because we've done combined efforts with water easements, and we still do that on some. This one, I don't see any benefit for where they're going to be able to get in there. It's so tight going through the trees and along that power line that's our major hurdles and trying to get anything else in there. And if we ever need to do a second line, we're not going for a very big easement. We just want enough that we can get 2 pipelines through there.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
And you said it was coming in grants from the federal. Is that going to be accepted only for communities, or will individual homeowners and property owners be able to apply for those grants?
So not that type of grant would not be for individual homeowners. So that would really be for a county government, a municipality. I think even nonprofits could apply for that, but it is a relatively cumbersome process. And as John was explaining, you have to have wage rates, Davis-Bacon wage rates, and review certified payroll. And so there's a lot that goes into accepting that type of funding. So that's really not geared towards individual homeowners. But then during a big project, there are some components like abandoning septic systems. Oftentimes, either USDA or CDBG would fund that and would have to work with individual homeowners. And typically, for them to get some type of assistance for that, they would have to be within a certain income bracket to qualify for funding. But yeah, the big federal money is really geared towards counties, municipalities, that type of thing.
If we talk privately, can we find out if there are some towns and or cities that are better or worse than that at doing that than others?
Oh, sure.
I think there are some towns and stuff that are combining together and trying to do
Yes.
the lead, copper, and try to do some of that removal as a group for the whole community or the whole municipality. They can-
Pooling resources.
They can apply for that bigger loan, and then they can investigate all the houses in the community.
Excellent question. Thank you. Any others? All right, so I have one that I'm going to give you all the opportunity. You have a room full of business owners, developers, and economic development folks. What can people in positions like the ones that these men and women sit in, what can they do to help you guys facilitate the continual investment and growth of the infrastructure that you need to support your respective communities? This is your podium. You get to tell us what you need.
Well, I guess with my environmentalist hat on, I would say to make sure that this is a priority and to make your elected officials know. And again, here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, the water and sewer is pretty much in the municipalities, but you can only grow so far on wells and septic systems, and that's not a sustainable way to grow. So make it a priority to serve septic systems with municipal sewer and help clean up your rivers and the bay, and just make that a priority and make sure your elected officials know that it should be.
Mr. Hall?
Well, I think the need drives the infrastructure, and I think folks in this room working with the economic development folks at the local level, the county level, each project's different, but if there's a need for it there and the community gets behind it, I think, folks will find a way to get the services there with whatever option might suit it best. But at least in Accomack, people are really at ground level. It's not the pie in the sky. You know, we're not trying to pull all the Microsoft offices and into Accomack County. So very realist is what I'm getting at. It needs to be a viable project that people can get behind, and then everybody working together, the developers, the local government, and the industries to bring the project to construction.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And John?
I guess my quick thought on top of that would be when you're purchasing this land for development or you're looking to put your new commercial business, look to see what infrastructure is there now. It may look like it's close, but do that research because we get a lot of disgruntled people that come in there and they think that there's sewer close by or they think that there's water close by and they think that it's cheap to put it in the ground and it's not there. And they get very upset when it can't happen as fast as they want. The price might be more on that one that already has infrastructure, but you might find out in the long run that it's more cost effective to do it that way and quicker to get it off the ground.
Thank you all so much. And let's give our panelists a round of applause. I'm glad I pegged those buzzwords earlier, opportunity and collaboration, because it sounds like there's a ton of opportunity to get our infrastructure and our utility systems where we need them. But it's only going to be accomplished through collaboration with the public and the private sector. So thank you all again.